Today we're going to be talking about a certain kind of stereotype about, oddly enough, point of view. Tell me if you've ever heard this one before. Present tense is only for juvenile fiction. It is for young adult. And if you are writing for adults, you should not be using the present tense. Let us all collectively roll our eyes together at that little bit of prescriptive nonsense. The thing about present tense is that, yes, when you think about writing in the present tense, you do tend to think about YA literature. And this is because some of the biggest YA books have been written in the present tense. Think The Hunger Games, think the Divergent series, which, if you can believe it or not, in the first two books, it was a hugely popular series. And then the third book, we'll just say it disappointed some fans. And of course, we all know the misery that befell the movie franchise. But those books were written in the present tense and very effectively. The problem with that success is that it kind of pigeonholed using the present tense in the YA genre, specifically the YA dystopian genre. But that's not the way it has to be. A lot of us have things to say about book talk, but if there is a positive aspect of book talk, it's that readers are making their voices heard, and a lot of them are saying, you know what, actually, not only do I prefer reading books in the present tense, I demand it. If I see the past tense or if I see third person, I'm not reading this. To be clear, I disagree with that outlook, but it does exist. So if you're in the midst of writing one of your first drafts and you don't know what tense to use, what is the right tense to use for my book? Is present tense most correct? We're going to talk about that today. What is the present tense? What are the options for using it? And should you use it? Hello, Shameless Writers. I'm Kristen McTiernan, the nonsense-free editor, here for your, I'm hoping, twice monthly dose of writing and publishing wisdom. I probably don't need to explain this to you, but just in case I do, I don't want to go over anybody's head. When we talk about present tense writing, we are talking about what tense the narration is written in. In dialogue, most often the speakers are using present tense. If they're having internal dialogue, like they're thinking to themselves, that's almost always in present tense. So that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the narration portion of the book. If a book is written in third person past tense, which is the most common regardless of genre, it'll be something like, Sasha walked daintily down the hill. She thought to herself, why am I here? Why is it raining? But then those silly thoughts left her head as suddenly as they came, and she continued her walk. This is all in the past tense. All of the verbs are in the past tense. It's like you are relaying to the reader something that has already happened, and you're just telling them about it. Conversely, books written in the present tense, whether it's third person or whether it's first person, it's just what it sounds like. It's in the present tense. Instead of saying Sally walked, you would say Sally walks down the hill, thinking to herself, why am I here? What is the weather doing today? Laughing, she shakes her head and continues on with her walk. I can't remember if I have mentioned this in previous videos, but I am actually not super fond of present tense writing. I don't like it so much as a consumer of fiction, and I definitely don't like it in writing. I have never, ever, ever written in the present tense. It's just not something that feels natural to me. And I made the mistake of mentioning that preference on Twitter one time, and one of my clients was like, oh, well, my book's in the present tense, so I won't send it to you. So me and my big mouth. But the preference remains. But here's the thing. Just because you don't have a preference for something doesn't mean that it's wrong or that it's bad or that people shouldn't do it. As a matter of fact, present tense does have very firm usages where in many cases it is superior or can be superior to using the past tense. There are certain genres that lend itself to the immediacy of the present tense, where instead of relaying a story to your reader as you would in third person past tense, you're putting the reader directly in the perspective of your POV character, especially if it's written in the first person. When I first read Divergent, and yes, I loved that book, even though I was a grown adult, I picked up that YA book and I loved it. I loved it so much. I read the audiobook version, I read it. And Emma Galvin's narration made me feel like I was Triss. It's a rare exception to my general disdain for present tense. It really worked for that particular book. So if you want that sense of immediacy, that sense of right now, that sense of not only are you reading about the MC, you are the MC. The present tense, specifically in the first person, is fantastic for that. So yes, it's very good to use in YA or any kind of new adult if you're focusing more on a younger reader, because they, I hate to say this, their imaginations are still much better than grown people. Once you get to a certain age, it can be very difficult to like actively pretend you're another person, but young people can do it very well, and the present tense facilitates that. Another genre that really works well with the present tense is horror, because you want them to feel that visceral disgust at the gore, especially like if it leans into splatterpunk. You know, you really want them to feel that danger, that terror at whatever is chasing them, and, you know, whatever viscera might be flying around the room. I'm not a horror reader. I've also seen it used very effectively in women's fiction, and a lot of people roll their eyes, ooh, chick books. No, these books are all about emotions and dealing with internal struggle and dealing with societal issues and just kind of how to go about your life as a woman when it feels like, I mean, you're not in danger, but why is life so hard? Using the present tense in situations like that can make it feel much more personal to the reader. Author Chuck Palahniuk, he wrote Fight Club. I have no idea how to pronounce his last name, even though he's mega famous. I will not butcher it here. But if you did not know, the cult classic Fight Club was a book first before they made it a movie. A lot of people don't know that. I'm not going to say it was bad because it wasn't. Obviously, they made a movie out of it. It was good, and it was written in the present tense, and that was absolutely the correct tense to use. I am not the target readership for that book, and I didn't like it as much as I liked the movie, maybe because, you know, Brad Pitt did a lot to make me enjoy what is essentially a men's movie. I don't know, but I really liked the movie in a way that I did not like the book. That being said, using the present tense really made it much more visceral. You understood everything that was going on in a way that I don't know that past tense would have communicated. And of course, I'm not going to spoil the 30-year-old twist, but if you know the secret of Tyler Durden, imagine how shocking it is when you find that out, written in the present tense in the book. It was very effective. I will also say, and I've kind of hinted at this thus far, there is a difference in how you use present tense narration in first person versus third person. Third person present tense is the rarest form of writing. And for good reason, full disclosure, I don't like it. First person present tense, I can get behind it. Like with the Divergent series, it really worked well. With a lot of other works that I've read, specifically with women's fiction and horror, it works great. If you're going to write third person present tense, weirdly enough, those tend to be kind of, I don't want to say high art, but they tend to be more thoughtful books with a smaller audience. So if it's hard sci-fi, you might just find yourself reading third person present tense. If it's elevated horror, we'll call it, you might find it there. And then in literary fiction, it's actually the most common where you have third person present tense. It just hits the ear wrong for me. And I've never found an instance where I'm like, yes, this was the correct choice. But that is my personal preference. I do want to emphasize that, which is not to say that preferences don't matter. They do. You should ask yourself, what does my reader expect when they open up this book? When they see what genre it is, when they see that I'm the author, when they see what the cover looks like, if you know what your cover looks like or what you want it to look like. What will they be expecting? That's an important consideration. So if you're writing a romantasy, having alternating first person, past or present tense, honestly, points of view is probably going to be most satisfactory to your readers. That's what they've become accustomed to with recent releases. They don't really want to read third person. They want to read first person. Maybe they're not super picky about present or past tense, and that's great because that gives you flexibility. But they might be a little stingy about that first versus third thing. It's something that's very important. My most famous Twitter spat, and it wasn't even a spat, I just full on got yelled at, was I put in some comment that self-published authors should be reading bestsellers from their genre, recent bestsellers, what's selling hot right now, what's been selling in the last 2 years in your genre. And a big name author, and I'm not going to say who he is because I don't hate this man. He was just really mean to me, and so were his readers, retweeted me and was like, folks, don't do this. Read everything. Read across genres. And I think he was so upset because, you know, it was a part of an existing conversation. He thought that I was talking to readers when really I thought I was talking exclusively to indie pub authors. So that was fun. My mentions were just a dumpster fire for, I think, a full 3 days. So thanks, Larry. Won't say the last name. I kind of forgive you. His books are so good, I have to forgive him, but, you know, dick move. Dick move, Larry. The point of that story is that if you don't know what your most voracious readers expect because they read 50 to 100 books a year, and yes, those people exist, usually they have two going at once. They have like their hard copy book, and then they have a separate audio book that they're reading at the same time. Do not alienate these people. They are your most voracious readers. So what do they expect? What do they like? What do they prefer? What are their icks? And if present tense is one of their icks, probably not a good idea to write in that. Present tense can also go wrong. And I've seen this in draft form. I've never seen this in a finished book. Some authors, if they have a multi-POV book, they will have one character who writes in the present tense, and then all of the other POV characters take place in the past tense. This is a tactical decision by the author. It's not sloppiness. They do this quite purposefully, and often it's very effective. But if you slip in the writing process and, you know, a third person past just comes most naturally to you, and the character that you're supposed to be writing in present, you slip back into the past tense, that can be a problem for your reader. And I mean a big one. If you hire an editor, they will find it. So that's what we're here for. If you send it to your beta readers, they'll definitely find it because your beta readers will be skilled in your particular genre. They're going to find it, which is why you never, ever, even with self-publishing, let your book out the door until you've had several people review it. That's just the way it goes. There are things that you will never see reading it over and over and over again. You need that separate set of eyes. As always, this video is brought to you by The Nonsense Free Editor, a full-service editing, ghostwriter, author marketing, and self-publishing platform. Whether you just need that last set of eyes before your book goes out the door, or you need everything from a rough draft all the way to release day, The Nonsense Free Editor is here for you. There's a link in the description and a link on my YouTube channel if you need any of these services. Present tense can also be difficult if we're talking about something that happened in the main character's past, because for that, you will be talking in the past tense. Because if we're talking about Monica right now, Monica walks down the hill, but as Monica is walking down the hill, present tense, Monica thinks back to last summer when Monica was in love with Gary. Gary was the hottest boy in school. You see what I'm doing there? And so there's that segue. We're moving away from the main action of the book, which is and must always be in present tense. And we're talking about some things that had happened last summer. Okay, that's going to be in past. So you have to have those transitions down pat so you don't confuse your reader and it doesn't sound like you've slipped up. If writing in the present tense is something that comes naturally to you because almost all of the books you read are also in present tense, this might not be difficult for you. This might not even be something you think about. It's just, yes, it's correct, and you don't struggle with it at all. But if you're an author who heretofore has written exclusively in the past tense, and you're trying out the present tense to meet the market demand of your genre, you might have to be really careful about that tense usage in the transitions and avoiding slipping back and forth between the two improperly. With all that said, like anything else, using the present tense, honestly, really depends on your execution. If it's written well, you can get away with a lot of rule breaking, as it were. We don't get too much into legalism here. We just get into best practices. Because if you write an entertaining, well-executed book, even if, oh, your grammar is bad here, and oh, you broke this rule here, and oh my God, it doesn't matter because your reader is enthralled with your book. So the execution is ultimately what matters. Now, hopefully without starting a flame war in the comments, what point of view do you like to read in most? And what point of view enrages you to the point where you will not even buy the book? I would love to hear back from you. Really, please tell me. So that's all I have today. I am happy to announce that all novels by Kristen McTiernan, the Nonsense Free editor, are now published wide at your favorite booksellers, whether that's Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and of course, the old classic, Amazon. You can also buy them directly from me, and I will have the second edition of Fissure of Worlds available, fingers crossed, by Christmas time. So until next time, take care and write well.